Hello and welcome. I am Nate, coach of the Buffalo Bouffalant, and this is the Wooper Club League Draft League Pokemon Season 6 post-draft interviews with all of the coaches. That's right, we're back for another season of the Wooper Club Draft League. A quick rundown of our history before we get going. Seasons 1 and 2, we had monotype draft leagues. Season 3, we tried out some VGC. Until Season 4, we finally delved into the traditional singles draft league format. From there, we decided every other season we would do the traditional draft league, and every other we would do something a little fun. So for Season 5, we had a lot of people getting into VGC, so we tried that out for a season. And now we are back with Season 6 being, again, that 1v1 traditional draft league. And we're very excited to get this going. We've got 10 people here, 7 of which returned from last season, and very excited to see what everyone can do with their squads this time now that Isle of Armor has been released. So, quick rundown, we've got 11 Pokemon per team. We've also including a Gmax form in that. So, you're only allowed to have one Pokemon drafted in that Gigantamax slot. It is a Pokemon that has a Gigantamax form available. It has to, again, it's the only thing that can Dynamax on your entire team, and it has to be the Gigantamax form, and then it has to hold a useless item. That's a little bit worse than holding no item because things like Knockoff can now, or Poltergeist now can also affect you. So we expect to see people using like TRs, Pokeballs, things like that. So with that being said, I'm excited to see what everyone came up with for their drafts. We're a little bit into the season. This is released a little bit late. And some coaches may have even already made some changes, but we're just going for what we went through and experienced in the draft, where the thought process was. So why don't we just hop right into that? Okay, we're going to start things off first with Jared, or Jabak. How are you doing, sir?
I'm doing all right, just living to the fullest.
Living your best life. He is the coach of the Cincinnati Ursaring, and he had the first overall pick, with which he selected the Dracovish, and then also followed that up with Duraludon, Lucario, Porygon Z, Talonflame, Gallade, Golisopod, Clefairy, Dusknoir, Fungus, and the Urshifu Rapid Strike Gmax form. So, first pick in the whole draft. I think this is the second draft season in a row. That's the first overall pick. Got the Dracovish. That seems to make a lot of sense, but why don't you go into a little bit about why you decided to snag that with that first pick?
Well, Dracovish really during season 5, he just held my team together. Just every week he was going out there doing his best, and I like that attitude he had.
Feels like you should have the ability Moxie then. Absolutely, Dracovish, just an absolute beast. And then we were able to complement that with another powerful water type in the Urshifu Rapid Strike Gmax form, and talk to you about why you chose that one too.
Well, that, as you guys may be aware, I am unfamiliar with the most recent iteration of Pokemon Generations, so that was the result of me sitting down and researching what I should complement the rest of my team with, and out of that came Urshifu. Seemed like a pretty good match considering the typing.
I definitely agree. I think these two work particularly well to kind of break down each other's checks. Having similar typing means that you just break through one of them, and then the other one should, in theory at least, remain unchecked, which is pretty cool. Pretty cool compliment for each other. So let's go on to the stats a little bit. I see some things about the speed tiers perhaps, but if you have any more insight on this overall, Steve?
Yeah, overall, the Cincinnati Ursaring have the highest average base attack stat in the league. So definitely the hardest hitting on the physical side. A little bit below average special attack and special defense and HP, below average speed and average defense. So definitely leaning on that high physical attack to push through enemies.
Sure. And I do see, although the speed stat is a little bit lower than normal, I think that's because the Talonflame is the only thing that hits above that base 100, up there at 126. But then all of the rest of them, a lot of those big threats going between 75 and 97, while it may seem a little bit clumped, having things of that high a speed tier, and it doesn't seem that high, but considering the overall quality of speed in the current generation, those are all actually very threatening, and something that everyone that prepares for needs to be aware of. All those speed tiers there, kind of in the upper part of the middle area there. Now moving on to some cores, I of course see for the traditional fire, water, grass, the Talonflame as the fire portion. Grass, untraditional with Fungus, and then water we have a few ones here. We have the Dracofish, Urshifu, and Gliscod fulfilling somewhat similar roles, but again, able to break down checks for each other. As for the Fantasy core, you see of course Duraludon picking up both Steel and Dragon. Lucario is a Steel type, but not nearly as defensive as Duraludon. And Clefairy being the untraditional part of the Dragon Fairy Steel core. Again, I do like Clefairy as a tier 5 pick, actually, even unevolved. Anything else that you notice trending in the stats there, Steve, in the typings, I mean?
Yeah, there are a couple of key weaknesses that stand out. As mentioned, there's a lot of common types on this team, and those common types kind of compound into a couple key weaknesses, being electric, flying, and psychic, due to the heavy reliance on water and steel types. But outside of that, pretty decent type spread, and some of the best resistances to types, especially like to bug in the league.
Outstanding, yeah. You have to bring those particular types, again, if Jared can kind of compound those strengths on top of each other, they can even start to break through those. So good stuff there. We're going to move on to the hazards. A little bit lighter than you may like, only having Talonflame for defogging, but then you have a couple of reliable options for Stealth Rock with Clefairy and Duraludon, and Gliscod, of course, with the interesting option of Spikes. Clefairy also complementing the team well with being the Cleric option, Aromatherapy or Heal Bell being available, as well as a very nice Wish Passer, not, of course, as good as its older sibling Clefable, but still pretty nice there. And Glade, if you decide to take a defensive option with Glade at any point, Glade can help out with Wish as well. Then Priority, you do have quite a few options with this. This is maybe one of the biggest strengths of the team to help overcome the overall somewhat middling speed stat. You have Shadow Sneak on Dusknoir is very nice. Glade with Shadow Sneak, of course, able to boost that as well. Golisopod with Aqua Jet and First Impression being Stab, First Impression being multiple times of priority as well, and then Sucker Punch to complement that. Lucario, one of the kings of priority, Bullet Punch, Extreme Speed, Quick Attack, Vacuum Wave, all sorts of options on both sides of the board, and of course Talonflame with Quick Attack. So that is definitely a strength for the team. That's pretty much all I've got here. As top to bottom is very scary, very threatening. Obviously, the attack stat stands out quite a bit. I really like the Porygon Z pickup to complement all the physical attackers there, hitting hard on the special side. Do you have any closing thoughts for us before we wrap things up?
No, just that I'm hoping my team can pull through in next week's match. You know, we're looking to kick some butt.
Absolutely, 1 week at a time. Thank you for the interview. Really appreciate it, and we'll be moving on to the next one. Next up, we're going to talk with Haberfish, coach of the Cleveland Castforms. How are you doing today?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I am not bad. I think you have a very cool team here, so I'm excited to talk about this a little bit. Haberfish here picked 2nd overall, and his team consists of Ferrothorn, Hydreigon, Scolipede, Togekiss, Alolan Marowak, Porygon 2, Mudsdale, Alolan Raichu, Dusclops, Stonejourner, and with that 2nd overall pick, the G-Max Lapras. Not necessarily something you see all the time in a singles format, but I know how effective screens can be. Why don't you go talk a little bit about why you picked that Lapras G-Max so early in the draft?
Yeah, so our last season we played VGC 2020, and I used Lapras as my kind of G-Max Pokemon, and I really liked the different screens, the 2 screens with Aura However, I think one problem I realized is that was with was it Light Clay or something that keeps the screens up, and as to our rules, we can't have items that are useful in our G-Max Pokemon, so the light screen doesn't stay up as long. It's not as useful. We're also not playing doubles, so not as useful as it was in VGC 2020, but still fun to play.
Absolutely, and I think as we go on to see some of the other elements of the team, there are definitely opportunities for you to set up things behind the screens should that Lapras end up going down, or you make a good switch out. So the other 2 significant mons, the tier 1s, the Ferrothorn and Hydreigon up at the top there. I want you to talk a little bit about those 2 as well.
Really like Hydreigon, just was one of my favorite Gen 5 Pokemon, and I like Dark Dragon. Ferrothorn as well, I wanted something that could do more hazards this season, and I wanted more. I think I was kind of okay with maybe potentially setting up a Trick Room team when I wanted to, so that those were, I think that's kind of why I picked Ferrothorn. Sure,
I think Ferrothorn's a little underrated in an offensive aspect for sure, so that works out pretty well. Stats, there are some big numbers and some small numbers compared to others, but Steve, why don't you go into a little more detail on the stats?
Yeah, this is I think the most interesting team stat-wise. Has the lowest average base speed, as mentioned with that potential Trick Room mode. It's very evident when looking at the average speed. And then behind that, having the highest average defense by far, just barely the second highest average special defense, and on the higher side for the average attack, definitely seeing that bulk there. Average HP and one of the lowest special attacks on average. But still, definitely that just overall bulk, that slower Pokemon build you get, along with a decent attack stat, really makes a threatening Trick Room mode whenever that is able to come out.
Sure, I think a couple of picks really complement that well too. Obviously, you have the low speed if you do set up the Trick Room. Ferrothorn as mentioned. The Alolan Marowak works very well under it. Mudsdale with a couple of cool setters with Dusclops and Porygon 2. And then I think, again, to complement that, very high speed stats too. The Scolipede with Speed Boost that can boost up in multiple different ways there. The Hydreigon, which is a very good choice scarfer and such. The Alolan Raichu for a fast electric type. You have both sides of the spectrum there, which is really cool to see. I think that's pretty well put together overall there. And complementing that, of course, with the high attack, defense, special defense. Whoa, this is going to be a menace to prepare for, I think. As far as typings go, too, I think you did a very good job here with the traditional fantasy core of the Dragon Fairy Steel. You got Ferrothorn, Togekiss, Hydreigon, all of them at the top there, tier 1s and 2s. And then the traditional Firewater Grass core, Alolan Marowak, Ferrothorn, and the G-Max Lapras, hitting everything that you need there. A grounded Poison type in Scolipede, a fast electric type in Alolan Raichu, a ground type for an electric immunity, a Ghost type. Everything seems to be hit here on all levels. So how's the typing spread looking there, Steve?
Yeah, defensively there are a couple weaknesses standing out. Weaknesses to Dark, Fire, Ghost, and one of the worst in the league against Steel, although really it's not that bad. And Rock, of course. Rock still looks pretty bad, but compared to others in the league, it's average.
Sure. So just a couple of things to patch up, but again, if you just make your way through that, you should be just fine. So let's move on to hazard control. As you already mentioned, Ferrothorn, one of the kings of hazards, Spikes and Stealth Rock access from that, as well as Stealth Rock from Alolan Marowak, Stealth Rock from Mudsdale, Spikes and the cool T-Spikes option from Scolipede, and even Stonejourner there with the Stealth Rock option. And to complement that, two very good defoggers, you have Togekiss and Hydreigon, very reliable when you choose to run defog on them, along with heavy-duty boots to help to kind of mitigate some of the rock weaknesses. Cleric options, Lapras is a cool, interesting option for that. Togekiss, though, is of course the traditional Heal Beller. Whenever you think of Heal Bell, I usually end up thinking of the Evolutions and Togekiss. It's also a fantastic Wish Passer, too, with all that bulk, and Alolan Raichu, another interesting Wish option should you decide to go for that. And then finally with priority, Shadow Sneak Dusclops, cool option to get around its low speed stat. Ice Shard from Lapras, actually very plausible, especially with potentially a physical Lapras. Raichu has quite a few options. Extreme Speed is pretty cool. And Togekiss also with Extreme Speed. Not necessarily known for that high attack stat, but having that option is really cool. So, in conclusion, I see a lot of Pokemon obviously influenced by a time doing doubles in VGC, but I think it all comes together very well and very effectively. So I'm really excited to see what all you can do with it. If you have any other closing thoughts before we wrap things up?
Yeah, I think my philosophy has been within these past few leagues that I just really like playing with Pokemon that I know kind of well, and I've gotten to know Alolan Raichu when I was doing an electric type team. I really got to know Togekiss while doing a flying type team. So these things I think have kind of culminated in like picks that I like choosing, especially if I can put the team together within like an hour before a match. That's always useful.
Hey, honestly, we don't always have the time for it, so to be able to quickly say, I know what this does, I know what this does, and be comfortable with it is a big deal. And everything came together pretty well, so exploit opponent's weaknesses, you should be just fine. That'll be it for this one, and we'll move on to the next one. Next up, we've got Zach, the coach of the Summit County Psyducks. How are you today?
I'm doing good. How are you?
I'm doing outstanding. Am I right in saying that this is your first draft league, or?
Yes.
Right,
It
so
is my first draft
so
league.
Zach has much more of a VGC background. He actually just won Season 5 of the Wooper Club League, which was VGC, so congrats on that recent achievement there. But he obviously knows what he's doing, and I think the draft backs that up. So a quick rundown of the team. He's got Kyurem in Tier 1, followed by Mandibuzz, Rotom, Heat, Bronzong, Slurpuff, Serena, Vaporeon, Rhyperior, Raboot, Turtonator, and the G-Max of choice is Gengar. So Gengar, not only the fastest member of the team, but your first pick that you made as the number 3 pick. So why don't you talk a little bit about why you made that selection there?
Yeah, so when I was looking around at the Gmax picks, one thing that I really kept in mind was the item choice, because at least in our draft, you can't have any items that would do anything substantial. So,
Right.
that just leaves TRs, Pokeballs, and other kind of items that wouldn't be beneficial to it. So I was looking around and I saw Gengar, and most of the time it's running Black Sludge, and I thought, well, if it doesn't have that passive healing, that's not too bad in my opinion. Because if you have something like Cinderace, and you want it to run Boots most of the time, so I was just keeping that in mind, and especially the speed. The speed was really, really nice. And,
Definitely.
the special attack is even better. So I just wanted to, pick a mon that would be very useful for a singles format. And like you said before, I don't really come from a singles format. It's much more of a VGC player. So with those two things in mind, that Gengar is relatively good in singles, and the item not being losing the item not being too bad.
And I feel like too, even Gengars that run Life Orb, you can kind of make up for that a little bit running the G-Max Poison and being able to get the special attack boost anyways. So.
Right. And if I can get like a nasty plot,
True,
plot off too, that would be even better than just keep spamming Max Ooze and just watch that special attack just keep going up.
Gengar just gets better and better. I love having a good Ghost type and a good grounded Poison type on my drafts too. So a couple boxes to check off there. So I mentioned before, this is the fastest thing on your team and very good special attack, Steve. I don't know if you have anything else here for the stats on the team overall that we could look at.
The team overall is fairly average compared to the rest of the league. A little bit on the lower side with an average 71 in speed. But other than that, a little bit pretty good defense. 95, third highest overall. HP's looking pretty good, third highest at 85. But other than that, looking in the middle ranks on everything else. Not especially low or high on anything.
Right, so I'm saying kind of a balanced team build comp over here, or overall here.
Yeah.
Okay, so you're gonna some middling speed. I see decent separation of speeds though too, like going from Kyurem's 95 to Rotomeat's 86 down to like the the Serena 72. There's still a little bit of separation there, which I think I can definitely appreciate for that. Some of the cores you've got here too, the Steel Dragon Fairy core. You got Bronzong, Kyurem, Slurpuff, Fire, Water, Grass, Serena, Vaporeon, and then 3 fire types. So got that all pretty well covered there too. Is that something you kept in mind whenever you were drafting?
Yeah, so when I was drafting, being this like my first draft, I really tried to stick to cores. And I don't think I finished the cores until much later on in the draft, but it was always in the back of my mind.
Right.
After I picked a Gengar, I picked a Kyurem, and so that's kind of what started me on the, building on my core. But yeah, so I think the first core that I finished was probably the Fairy Dragon Steel one, and then after that I got to the Fire Water Grass core, and then finally I finished out a Dark,
Dark Fighting and Psychic.
Yeah, Dark Fighting and Psychic. Raboot being the fighting type because
it is a little bit, yeah, much as a fire type, it's not really, but.
Yeah, exactly. It's pretty much whatever type you want it to be. So.
Which makes it a really cool pick, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it can do a lot of different things. I think it was a video with PokeGame. He showed Raboot, and it did pretty well, actually.
Well, you got when Cinderace is banned, you got to get something else in there. So.
Yeah, exactly.
94 speed, actually, very good.
Yeah, it's actually my third highest in speed, just after Kyurem, so that's pretty nice. And I mean, you can run it with an Eviolite, you can run it with a Scarf if you want to. I mean, there's a lot of things you can really do with Raboot, and I think it's a pretty solid tier 5 pick.
All right, and I see even with the tier 1 Gmax, you're able to kind of load up on some tier 2s and 3s, which help your cores be of a slightly higher tier than others too. If you try to fill out one of those cores with a tier 4 or 5 pick, you didn't really have to stretch your reach for those at all. So that's pretty nice.
Yeah, I was a little worried at first just because I have 4 tier 3 Pokemon and not like another tier 1 or another tier 2. So I was a little bit worried about that, but I think all my tier 3 picks are pretty solid.
Definitely, and that just leans into the balance aspect of the team overall.
Definitely.
So that, of course, Kyurem is the tier 1 pick, so what are you expecting from this thing? Usually tier 1, whenever I look at that, I think I should try to bring this to most every match. I can run a few different things with it. I think Kyurem embodies that pretty well. We recently moved this up from tier 2 to tier 1 with the changes that it got from the Isle of Armor.
Yeah, I think it's definitely a really nice pick. When I was thinking about which one to do, it was kind of between Kyurem and Mew. But I decided to go with Kyurem just because its attack and its special attack is just so high, and that really makes it just a really big threat. Because I mean, if I really wanted to, I could make it a physical attacker. I feel like most of the times yeah, exactly. So I could do a lot of things with it. So it really just kind of depends on it depends on the match, really. And plus, I mean, it's just so good. I think, in my opinion.
I think it's definitely
really,
fair,
really nice. Yeah, solid.
Super bulky. It can do just about everything. As a Kyurem Black owner from last season, yes, the Kyurem forms are that good.
Yeah.
All right.
And plus, I mean, you could just run it with something with a choice spec set, or if you want to, you can also do a sub roost set as well.
Definitely, yeah.
So
boots, leftovers, lumberry, whatever you need to make that work.
Yeah, even if you want to you can do metronome or something like that. So I feel like you can get pretty cheeky with it.
Definitely, a ton of options. That's what you want from it. So moving on a little bit into the hazard control section, I know you really were happy about that. Having Stealth Rock on Bronzong and Rhyperior, as well as Sticky Webs on Slurpuff, and then hazard removers are the Mandibuzz and Rotom Heat having Defog, both very reliable, and a couple of pretty good Rapid Spinners too. Serena, very reliable Rapid Spin, and though it isn't listed, the Turtonator also with Rapid Spin. I noticed a few weaknesses to Stealth Rock there, but you have tons of good defoggers and Rapid Spinners to complement them. Of course, Heavy Duty Boots is a fantastic item.
Yeah, especially on something like Tsarina, it really benefits from having Rapid Spin and a U-turn, and also carrying boots on it too. So yeah, I just really wanted to make sure that I was set in the hazard control section. I mean, Mandibuzz is one of the best defoggers in the game.
Very reliable.
Yeah, very, very reliable. Rotom Heat, I mean, you don't see it run defog too many times, but I mean, it's really nice that it has it. And then, yeah, it's Arena, really good Rapid Spinner. Plus, having Queenly Majesty, it's really, really nice. Especially against any people, any sort of priority attackers.
Especially with the Rapid Spin buff now giving +1 speed as well. Helping out the speed tiers a bit and complementing the Queenly Majesty.
Definitely. And I mean, I really like Sarina's move pool. It gets fighting, gets fairy, grass, of course.
The new ice coverage and triple axle.
Yeah, triple axle is really nice. I actually thought about bringing it to the last match against John because it has a triple axle. So if he brought something like a Moongus, then I would.
That's definitely a big thing. Is grass types often struggle with other grass types, so having that tool in his arsenal.
Yeah, and being able to hit being able to hit flying types for super effective. That's really nice.
True. Moving on to some cleric options, you have Slurpuff, Serena, and Vaporeon, all with the ability to Aromatherapy or Heal Bell. And you also have a couple of Wish passers too. Slurpuff and Vaporeon have had some experience with the evolutions in Wish. It takes a lot of pressure off of everything else that tries to tank, stuff that doesn't have that reliable recovery. And having so many of these, as well as multiple Aromatherapy users, that's super reliable. That's good.
Yeah, and again, that kind of just goes back to, just trying to balancing out everything, making sure that I have all my bases covered. That was really just a big point of, my draft. I just really wanted to have options. That was my biggest thing.
Right. And then finally, the last section we've got here is the priority. Gengar probably not going to be using Sucker Punch, as would Rotom Heat, but Raboot with the Sucker Punch. The ability to change types with it is pretty darn nice. Maybe a couple cheeky options here to pick something off, but priority isn't necessarily the name of the game with the squad. You have plenty of other ways to control that speed anyways, between Sticky Webs, Rapid Spin, boosting speed, and whatnot.
Yeah, I wasn't really too worried about priority. I mean, if I have it, that's nice. Like you said before, probably the only mon that might actually use priority would be Raboot with Sucker Punch. But yeah, I think there's a lot of other things that I can do if I so choose to go with priority. Just to be, a little cheeky.
So I think well, we can pretty much start to wrap things up here. If either of you two have any other comments you'd like to make on the team overall.
Looking a little bit at the type matchups overall, I see Rock is probably going to be a tough thing for you. Not just Stealth Rock, but also the type itself.
Right, I see the top three picks there, the Tier 1 and both Tier 2s weak to Rock, right?
Right.
Yeah.
So Rock definitely going to have to lean on Bronzong and Rhyperior if your opponent's got a strong Rock user. But otherwise than that, types are looking pretty decent.
Pretty balanced. Okay.
Yeah, and I think the whole league overall is very weak to Rock.
Yes.
Correct. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
I think you're definitely right.
Yeah. But yeah, I definitely Rock is a pretty big threat on my team. But we'll see how it goes.
Fair enough. Well, definitely appreciate you joining us. As Ed said in the intro, we've already gone through 1 week, and we're already 1-0 with +4. So looking forward to seeing a successful season from you in singles.
All right. Well, thank you for having me on today. Appreciate it.
Next up, we've got Joey, coach of the Akron Aggrons. How are you today?
I'm doing all right. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. So Joey finished 4th out of 8 last season in the Wooper Club League. Back again for another crack at it. And just going a quick rundown of his team that he picked this time. He's got Jirachi and Rillaboom up in Tier 1. Followed up by a Chansey, Galvantula, Incineroar, Noivern, Politoed, Ribombee, Sableye, Dugtrio, Alola, and the G-Max Dreadnought. Now, G-Max Dreadnought was also your first pick, I believe, in this draft at pick number 4. Why don't you go a little bit into why picking the Dreadnought?
Yeah, sure. So going into this season, for our previous VGC season, I had a rain team, and I kind of liked that, so I wanted to try doing a rain team in this draft. And looking at the G-Max Pokemon, Dreadnought seemed like the best for a rain team, with Swift Swim, a reasonable speed stat, and great attack.
Right, and it's something that its water move doesn't set up its own.
Yeah, he does not set up his own rain, which is unfortunate.
Right. But that's why
I took him first. And I should have taken Pelipper first instead.
As we learned shortly after, Weather was pretty popular this draft, it would appear. So definitely a contentious kind of pick there already. So why don't we go into the overall base stat totals for the draft, if you would, Steve?
Yeah, so Joey is looking here pretty poor on average. The lowest average attack, the lowest average defense, attack at 82, defense at 71, lowest average special attack at 74, also below average in special defense, but above average in HP and speed. A lot of the attack and defense especially are probably due to Chansey. Those 5s not really helping the averages out.
That little rascal.
Well, I see a couple of other Pokemon a little weaker on the physical side, like Ribombee and Sableye, that don't help towards stat totals, but maybe help out in other ways too. So
right, yeah,
correct.
But it's an interesting team. Again, the speed overall is very high. The speed control is very high too. I feel like that's kind of the main point of the team overall, is kind of focusing on outspeeding the opponent and tossing in those walls and other support mons when necessary. So real quick too, the tier 1s, the Jirachi and Rillaboom. The tier 1s, obviously the foundations of the team. What were your thoughts then picking up Jirachi and Rillaboom in those spots?
So Rillaboom, it just hits really hard. It's great. It's got the new priority option with Grassy Glide and Grassy Surge. So it's just great Pokemon. It also fits into the Grass, Fire, Water core. Yeah, so that was the main reason why there. It's a great wall breaker. Jirachi I picked to fill in my Psychic type. Also, it's very versatile, and it's got a similar moveset option to my Togekiss from last season, with the Paraflinch forever.
I know you're a fan of that.
Yes.
These are two very good, honestly, very diverse monsters. Jirachi does a lot of different things. Rillaboom can boost itself on the physical side, so very nice there. And you already touched on the core, so I guess I want to get into next. Rillaboom being definitely one of the better grass types for the Fire, Water, Grass core. Incineroar, another very solid pick for that. Definitely has utility even inside of the rain, with being able to parting shot around and such. And the water, you have obviously a couple of very good options with Politoed setting Rain and the G-Max Dreadnought rounding out that core. For the Dragon Fairy Steel, you have a couple cool picks. Noivern, something I've always wanted to try. Very fast mon as the Dragon Jirachi, as the Steel, and Rabombi for the Fairy. All very fast options for that Fairy Dragon Steel core. Not necessarily in a defensive sense then. This time around.
For Steel, there's also Dugtrio Alola as an option.
Of course. The magnificent hair being what adds the Steel typing on, presumably.
Yes.
So, obviously, you got the Chansey as a normal type, too, as a huge wall. You really need fighting coverage to take that thing down. But overall, I do like the spread of typings. If you have any other insight on the typings there, Steve.
In terms of weaknesses, the team seems a little weak to fire, more so than average at least. And I mean that could be simply through Jirachi, Rillaboom, Galvantula, a lot of those high tier picks being weak to fire.
Right.
The Dreadnought at that resisted really helps that out too.
Definitely, and the Politoed just setting Rain.
Yeah, Rain also definitely helps against the fire there. Funnily enough, you also have a basically similar weakness to Rock, but that doesn't stand out as much because the whole league's weak to Rock. So who
Very
cares?
true. We could definitely go into that at some point. I have some interesting theories why Rock is so good right now, just in this particular draft. But overall, pretty well balanced. If Fire's the biggest thing you have to worry about, then surely Rain will help that out quite a bit.
Right.
So let's go on to the hazard control a little bit. I know you have a ton of different Stealth Rockers. Chansey with Stealth Rock, Dreadnought G-Max. A couple different ways to get up Stealth Rock with its G-Max move, setting those up as well. Dugtrio Lola also setting up rocks. Jirachi also setting up rocks. And you also have two different ways to set up Sticky Webs too, in Galvantula and Rabombi. And finally Rabombi and Noivern being the defoggers. Noivern is a very reliable defogger, but we've already said it. Rock very good typing in this league, and you have a ton of ways to set up Stealth Rocks. So very nice. For Cleric options, we've got Chansey and Rabombi with the ability to sit in front of the team and Aromatherapy. Wish Passers, of course, Chansey, who's going to be Wish Passing. You already know what Chansey's going to be doing. Wish, and then also Jirachi with the Wish. Jirachi, the ability to act very defensive as well. Chansey, I feel like Chansey and Blissey very controversial picks in many draft leagues. They try to, some even try to ban them, and what are your thoughts on putting Chansey in a team like this on a Rain team? Going to help maybe balance it out a little bit?
I partially took Chansey because I hated facing it last season, so I didn't want that to happen. And it just helped fill out the bulk on my team a bit. Because last season I had Avalugg as a great physical wall. Before picking Chansey, I didn't really have any great walls similar to Avalugg was. Right. So Chansey just fills that for a special role.
Sure, something you could just kind of toss out there and you know it's going to take the hit.
Right.
Our priority is the next up on the list. Dugtrio Lola with Sucker Punch is pretty nice. Galvantula Sucker Punch not really going to be used. Incineroar, a cheeky fake out, same with Rillaboom, although not listed. Of course, Grassy Glide is available there. And the king of priority is Sableye, between Prankster and its bevy of moves, including Shadow Sneak probably as the most significant of that. So again, a lot of speed control options, and then even priority on top of that. So I think we all kind of know what direction the team is going in that regard. But overall, top to bottom, I think you have a great chance to make the top half of the league again. Well-rounded, well-balanced, ways to take advantage of that speed between the Dreadnought, the Incineroar, the Rillaboom. Any other thoughts on the squad before we wrap things up?
Going forward, I'm considering trading some members of the team around. As I was building for one of my matches, I was building my rain team, I realized I don't really want to have to bring Politoed and Dreadnought for a rain team. So
Sure.
I'm considering doing some trades to mix my team up a little bit more.
Sure, I think that could all make it a little more flexible too. Sure. Okay, well, definitely great to have you on. Looking forward to see how well you do this season. You're continuing to improve every single season. It's been a pleasure to watch. So best of luck moving forward.
Thanks. Good luck to you too.
Next up, we've got Matt, aka MrQuality, coach of the Cincinnati Incineroar. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. How are you?
Outstanding. So if you had caught the previous season of the Wooper Club League, you would know that MrQuality just finished runner-up in Season 4, and then I believe were you top 4 or runner-up again in the last season, the VGC season as well?
Yep, runner-up there.
Awesome. So success in singles and doubles. Looking to try to follow that up by claiming the Season 6 title. So going over the team real quick here, we've got Clefable in Tier 1, followed by Diggersby, Goodra, Grimmsnarl, Delmise, Inteleon, Luxray, Orbeetle, Steelix, Cramorant, and the Gmax Cinderace. And I believe you had the 5th overall pick in the draft, and you started off with the Gmax Cinderace. I want you to talk a little bit about your thought process in selecting that.
Yeah, this is definitely a pick that comes from my bias in VGC, where I think it's a very good Pokemon. I mean, even with, like, obviously not as good with Libero, but anything that can, like, is fast out of the gate and can get a max airstream, like, to get going, and then follow it up with, like, any kind of max knuckle, is going to be really good. Yeah, and so that was my thinking. Even though it doesn't have that guaranteed stab every time, it's still good. It can still, boost itself quite well, and I mean that's all there is to it, really. And it was fun to build a team around.
Definitely true. I think one of the more fun starters in recent memory. And oh no, you have to go off base 116 attack. Oh, with lots of coverage. Cinderace is such a good one, anyways. So moving on to the stats total overall, I do see in speed there's a rather large gap between that Cinderace and the next highest speed of, I believe, Orbeetle. But why don't we kind of go over all the stats, if you would, Steve?
Yeah, looking at compared to the rest of the league, the Cincinnati Incineroar are on average, about average or higher. Highest average special defense, on the higher side for attack and special attack. Pretty average for speed and defense, and just below average on HP. So overall, higher base stats totals than average, and looking fairly bulky too.
Sure, that high special defense, that makes some sense, having especially something like Goodra there, which is just an absolute monster, and doesn't look like anything has particularly low special defense, so that all makes some pretty good sense there. The speed tiers, even though I did mention that large gap, looks like they're decently well spaced out anyways there, so you have to try to figure out what you're trying to speed creep at one point or other there. Plus to help with
and
the
you got to mention that
Prankster.
And you got to mention that Inteleon is also faster than Cinderace.
By a whole 1 point. I know they did that on purpose. They had to have, right?
Oh, definitely.
All right, so I want to go over, in particular now, the Tier 1, which starts off your Fairy Steel Dragon Core, the Clefable. So Clefable, Tier 1, it makes a ton of sense for it to be nabbed somewhat early. It's very versatile, wins games on its own. What are your thoughts on it?
I mean, I picked it for those reasons. I have not played OU in this generation at all, but I've seen, the debate over, like, banning certain things and how it revolves. Like, all that conversation really centers around, like, Clefable, and it's like, oh, well, if we ban this, then it will just be, like, a very defensive metagame again, and, like, to have that kind of, like, power all on its own is very neat. So I figured I'd try it out for myself. It's one of the few defensive Pokemon I would consider taking in Tier 1, period. But, I mean, I think its tools are very obvious, and, being able to teleport and safely switch into a setup sweeper as well is, I mean, very handy when you've got a league like this, I think.
Yeah, Clefable, possibly the best Pokemon in each of the last 3 generations OU. Basically ever since getting that fairy typing. Yeah, Magic Guard is so good too. And of course, as mentioned before, it's the start of the Fairy Steel Dragon Core as well, Clefable and Grimmsnarl with the Fairy typing. The Steel type Steelix, which I think is actually a very nice pick out of Tier 4. And then the Dragon type Goodra in Tier 2, which I think gets a lot more versatility in Draft League than in other formats. For the Firewater Grass Core, the Cinderace Gmax, of course, and then Delmise as a very solid Tier 3 with lots of great utility and a very slept-on attack stat. And then a couple of Water types, Inteleon for the offensive option, Cramorant for a more perhaps mixed option. You kind of build that how you need it to be. So anything else on the typings there, Steve? Any patterns you're seeing in there?
Looking through, really pretty good overall. Compared to the rest of the league, has a weakness to poison. That's just going to come with the dual fairy types.
Sure.
Because no one else has an on average weakness to poison, so poison's a little better here. But other than that, nothing really stands out. Resists dragon pretty well, of course, because of the double fairy type. One of the better teams against rock, which we've kept on mentioning for how prevalent it can be this season. But that's what stands out.
Well, that's pretty well done then, and getting a lot of different typings there and covering all your bases. So awesome job in getting kind of a spread there, balance. Moving on to the hazard control, you know it's going to start with Cinderace and Court Change. Before getting Libero, it was often jokingly called Court Change as being its best move, but now obviously has a lot more utility beyond that. Even just slapping a Court Change for the max guard could be very useful. But hazard setup, we've got Steelix with Stealth Rock, Clefable with Stealth Rock, Diggersby with Spikes. Don't sleep on Diggersby setting up Spikes. There's a reason why Greninja was able to set up Spikes in previous gens. And then for removal, we've got a reliable Rapid Spin from Delmise, which can beat other Ghost types that try to block the spin, and then the Cramorant with Defog. So a couple different ways to remove hazards, a couple different hazards to set up. Not bad overall. That seems like a pretty healthy balance to me.
Don't forget the Sticky Web on Orbeetle, too.
Sticky Web and Orbeetle, that's a big option for sure. As I said, too, if there's the giant speed gap there, some of the somewhat middling speeds, something like Luxray, I think, could take huge advantage of Sticky Web, so fantastic to see. Only a couple teams with Sticky Webs this time around. That'll be pretty important. Cleric options, Clefable embodies all of it for your team, having Aromatherapy, Heal Bell, as well as Wish, so it definitely can take on that defensive role should you need it to. And then for priority, Diggersby with the Stab Quick Attack actually makes it pretty strong. I've got Inteleon with Aqua Jet Ice Shard Sucker Punch, very cool array. And of course, Grimmsnarl with Prankster, as well as things like Fake Out and Sucker Punch, can get as much priority as you need from that slot, even if its speed stat is somewhat middling overall. So there's a quick look at the team. Is there anything else that you would like to bring up before we wrap things up?
Yeah, just one quick thing. I think that this has helped me realize how solid the main core of this team really is. And I in my first week match, I honestly just knew the 6 Pokemon I wanted to bring without even looking at the other 4, because I just thought that they covered so many options. Obviously I ended up losing, but I think that in theory it was a good core. Well, I have 2 main cores typing wise, and then from there I'm able to just be a little more creative with anything else that I want to bring in future weeks. And you mentioned again, rightly so, that I do have some duplicity with types, with Grimmsnarl being a duplicate fairy and then Cramorant being a duplicate water. Honestly, both of those were kind of accidents. I would not be surprised if those don't stay on my team much longer.
Sure. If
anyone's looking for Grimmsnarl, it's single and available, so let me know. And yeah, that's all I got.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much for coming on here. Best of luck for this season. I know we all are very aware of how good you are and have been and continue to become. So definitely a scary team to look out for. Look forward to see what you do the rest of the season.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I think I definitely have a lot to live up for. And in my other draft league, I haven't started off so hot, so I got to get back on my mojo for sure. So.
I will help you out then.
All right. Peace.
Okay, now it is time with the number 6 pick to interview me. I guess I'll be like this. Steve will join in at times. Got a bit of a reversal going on here, but yeah, number 6 pick for the Buffalo Bouffalants. So if you're unaware, I was able to pull out victories in seasons 2, 3, and 4 the Wooper Club League in various formats, but we're back in Draft League. We're finally able to repeat a type of season, so people have a little more experience under their belts. I know everyone's going to be gunning for me to take an L, so let's see what I came up with here. So going through, I've got tier 1s in Dragapult and Tyranitar, followed up by Magnezone, Silvally, Mantine, Vikavolt, Colossal, Sneasel, Stoutland, Tangela, and the Gmax Sandaconda. Fun fact about this team, with the number 6 overall pick, I picked Tangela. Not anything you might expect, but the Tangela. I may have been a little bold in the playoffs and said if I go undefeated this season, I will pick up that Tangela in round 1, and I sure did. Tangela is, of course, my favorite Pokemon, and how could it not be yours too? Look at those little boots; it's so adorable. But yeah, Tangela, that was my first pick, and I have no regrets. So why don't we talk to Steve a little bit, see what the stats are like for the team overall.
Yeah, so for the Bouffalants, they have one of the highest average defense, second average overall at 96. Also,
thank you to Tangela.
Also the second highest average special attack, and one of the only teams that is like fairly well mixed in average attack and special attack with 88 special attack. Other than that, though, nothing spectacular. Middling HP, middling speed, middling attack compared to the rest of the league. For the speed breakdown, kind of leaning a lot on Dragapult and Sneasel on the high end. And then, filling out at various speed groups below that, Silvally at 95, Stoutland at 80. So definitely on the slower side, and from what I understand, slower than you typically like to draft.
Absolutely. I was able to follow my rule of thumb of getting 2 bonds at base 110 or higher, but after that, yeah, it really started to break down a bit. We see all these bonds from, say, the Mantine to the Tangela and Tyranitar, Magnezone, all of them hovering around that 60 to 70 spot is definitely not what I'm used to. We'll see if we can make something happen with all of that, but yeah, definitely, again, not something I'm used to. And the split between physical and special, as you said, was definitely something I try to pay attention in the draft more often now. Trying to get a nice mix, some ones that can go both ways. But I've become more and more happy and satisfied with the team as I've started to play around with it a little bit more. As far as the Tier 1s and the Gmax, Tier 1 Dragapult I was able to get in round 2. Very, very excited to see that still around. That 142 speed set, of course, as was mentioned, kind of carrying the team in that department. And then the ability to go physical or special, setup, defensive even because of being a very good ghost type and a very good dragon type. Super pleased to have that around in round 2 for me. And the Tyranitar was much more so of a counter pick. I saw how many teams were picking up weather, and I thought Tyranitar could do a very good job to disrupt that. Having some nice resistances to boot, having a very sturdy special wall to go with Tangela, and that can resist some common types like fire, some stuff like ghost. I mean, a very good ghost resist was important to me too. So I thought those were two pretty nice picks for the upper tiers that I found available. And then the Sandaconda just kind of fit in there, being able to get the picks that I wanted or needed. And Gmax Sandaconda not costing any points, me able to pick it at the very end. Steve and I were the last 2 folks left to pick up our Gmaxes, so we were able to save those for the end. Sandaconda, one big thing for me that I mentioned in my own breakdown is that it has the ability to recover a lot more easily than other things. And that's important when you don't have the access to things like leftovers on your Gmax in this league. So having Shed Skin and Rest, like I did with the Scrafty last season, gives me the opportunity to heal up without having to rely on the item. And I found that pretty valuable in the Gmax, as well as just having a lot of solid bulk on there so it can survive hits long enough to be able to maybe set up or just rest up and take care of it. So moving on to some of the cores, I don't have a traditional fantasy core, the Dragonsteel Fairy, because I don't have a fairy type. I would have to rely on my Silvally if I wanted that core. So if we assume that I bring a Fairy Silvally, which I can't do every week, then the Dragonsteel Fairy core would be Dragapult, Magnezone, Silvally, which is definitely not traditional, maybe more offensive than others, but that's what we've got going on there. And then the Fire, Water, Grass, I've got the Colossal, Mantine, and Tangela, all pretty low tiers for that, so definitely not building around the traditional cores this time around, but a couple of interesting typing conundrums here with things like Silvally is kind of an interesting one to prep for. What other insight do you have on the typings overall?
Yeah, so on the typings, the Buffalo Bouffalant have a lot of 4x weaknesses, and those really are stacking up, especially fighting and ground. Those both stand out as huge weaknesses for the team. Of course, with these, I'm kind of ignoring Savali because it could be any type. So, Savali can definitely be used to mitigate those, as well as there's other weaknesses that stand out in water. Steel is not bad, but it's one of the worst in the league. So definitely some abilities to exploit there. But again, the Savali typing can do so much to fix all that.
Sure. So I may end up relying on that quite a bit, but I'm kind of excited to see what I can do with the versatility that it provides. Being able to pick a particular type for each week will be a lot of fun. So we'll get to move on now to the hazard control. And Colossal itself puts in a lot of work for my hazards. As you can see, access to Stealth Rock and Spikes, as well as the Rapid Spin. Rapid Spin being a pretty valuable commodity that I noticed quite a few teams are lacking. The other hazard setters being Tarantar with Stealth Rocks, the Sandaconda GMX with Stealth Rock, and a Vikavolt with Sticky Webs. That's hopefully can patch up some of my issues with speed. Of course, it is still a Vikavolt, and you can't rely too much on it individually, but it is still here for that purpose. And a couple other removers as well, pretty reliable, Silvally and Mantine with the Defog. Mantine obviously carries boots often, Silvally can often carry that extra slot for Defog for support if it needs. So overall, pretty solid, pretty well-rounded. Don't need too much more than that. What I am lacking on is Cleric options for the, I believe, second straight season here. I don't have a Wish Passer, and I don't have a Cleric option right now either. So what you see is what you got for health. I'm kind of missing out on an evolution this time around. And then for priority, Dragapult with Sucker Punch, often used in OU for other Dragapults. That obviously isn't an issue right now, so we'll see how often that comes in. But the biggest one is Sneasel's Ice Shard coming in for picking off things that are a little bit faster and some really good ice coverage for speed. Sneasel not a defensive beast at all. It's just there to try to pick things off. So that should pretty much wrap things up. Again, I've gotten a little more comfortable with the team as I've started to prep with it more often. But I'm really excited to see what I can come up with for this. Do you have anything else for us, Steve?
I mean, yeah, I'm really excited to see what it is too. You've mentioned the multiple electric types in a league that really doesn't have a lot of electric communities.
Right.
That Volt turn ability out of those huge special attacks on Magnezone and Vikavolt is definitely something that I'm going to have to prepare for this week.
Absolutely. I suppose that is something else to mention. I have quite a bit of momentum between those, and of course the U-turn on Dragapult, the parting shot on Silvally. So momentum from the top tiers is something that's kind of built into the team that I'm excited to see if I can exploit in any way.
Yeah, I definitely think that'll be a huge factor if this team does well.
All right, I think that should wrap things up for us. If you want to see a more in-depth breakdown, I will give a quick shout out to my own channel. It should be linked down below. Please come check it out. We'll be doing videos for each week, so you can see my thought process and team building as well. And just the TRU draft breakdown should be up there right now. Please go check that out if you haven't already. We'll move on to the next one. And on the other side of the reversal, we've got me doing a solo interview now with SteveChuck. How are you doing?
I am doing great. How are you doing?
I'm doing pretty good. So SteveChuck, if you are not aware, is the Season 1 champion. And then this past draft season, Season 4, finished in the semifinals, I think 3rd overall. So definitely a seasoned battler in our league, someone who has had pretty darn good success. And is back again for another crack at the title. So going through the draft, we're going to start off with Cinderface Blaze, as that is your first pick. I believe you had the number 7 pick in the draft right behind me. Cinderace with his first pick. We also got Aegislash at Tier 1. And then follow that up with the Lycanroc Dusk, Rotom Wash, Sylveon, Scyther, Venusaur, Flygon, Eldegoss, Skuntank, and the G-Max Garbodor. So, Cinderace, tell me a little bit about why you picked it first. I'm assuming the speed had a little bit to do with it.
Yeah, the speed had a little bit to do with it. I was looking through, wanted, of course, a Firewater Grass Core, and looking at the high-tier fires, really didn't see much that caught my eye.
Yeah, definitely.
And it kind of landed on Cinderace, and was like, Cinderace is a pretty good Pokemon. The speed stat, the versatile move pool. So even though I don't get to use Libero, it's still quite effective, and I'm excited to see what it does this season.
Definitely one of the fastest things drafted at all this season. So definitely, I think could put in a good bit of work. And then just real quick, touch on the other Tier 1, Aegislash. This is something I am very familiar with, but what inspired you to pick that one up for your other Tier 1 pick?
Part of it was the success you had with it last season, but also just the Ghost Steel typing. I kind of picked it up towards the middle of the draft, and as I was going on, it just seemed... I know I needed a Ghost type and a Steel type, and it seemed like it worked quite well for me. Picked it up maybe a little earlier than I had to, but I, just in my head was like, I need to have this. It fits in what I need in terms of some bulk, some offense, and just the typing too. So
yeah, it's tough to find a better Steel type or Ghost type. Getting them both in one, checking those two boxes in one is very, very nice and convenient.
Yeah.
So we can go over the stats a little bit. I know the Aegislash kind of messes with the stat total a bit because on the site it's showing the attack and special attack there in the sword form, not the shield form. But if you could go over a little bit of your stats, please.
Yeah. So right now I am just factoring in the sword form stats. So some of these defenses especially get bulked up a little. But on the attack side, I have the second highest average attack stat, very physically leaning, and I noticed that as I was drafting.
Right.
Also, pretty high on the speed with third overall. Tends to be a faster team, but I pay for that with the bulk with third lowest HP overall, second lowest defense overall, and just middle of the road special attack and special defense.
Okay.
So kind of worried on the physical side with the low physical defense and the league in general being more inclined towards physical attackers. So we'll definitely see how that plays out. But it's more of an offensive team with a high speed and attack. So hopefully that works out.
It definitely appears to be leaning that way. And I'm definitely not taking notes because we're playing in week 2. But take a closer look at some of the speed too. We see, again, you already point out it's quite a fast team for the league. And I know that you have a lot of high-speed mons that are still somewhat evenly spaced apart from each other, and that is definitely beneficial when trying to prep against you. It makes it a lot tougher having the speed all over the place. And I have definitely noticed as well, it's more physical leaning, but you have plenty of ways to make up for that. Typing-wise, go over a little bit. Of course, Fire, Water, Grass, Core you alluded to. Almost starter-based. You got the Cinderace as Fire and Venusaur for Grass, but the Rotom Wash for Water. Definitely a nice Tier 2 pick. And then for the Fantasy Core, the Steel type Aegislash, the Fairy type Sylveon, and the Dragon type Flygon, which is a pretty nice Tier 4 pick there. If you want to go over anything else that you've noticed from the typings.
Yeah, typings, what stands out is a pretty bad ice weakness. This may or may not be related to a Flygon.
Sure, and I think a lot of that too is the lower tier stuff, so that's not necessarily as big a concern, I think.
True. Outside of that, compared to the rest of the league, a little worse in Psychic and Steel. Psychic is something I definitely saw.
Right, 3 poison types, right.
Yeah, that led to the Skuntank pick. Is I just saw I thought Dark type need it, and so
it's pretty decent for Tier 5, yeah.
Yeah. Excited to see how that eventually gets used. But other than that, not too many weaknesses that stand out. Rock, as we've been mentioning, is actually probably one of the worst for my team, but pretty average for the league, so we'll ignore that.
Sure. Well, I mean, Flygon's resistance is just fine, as well as Aegislash, so I'll have to take that and run. So overall, pretty well spaced out types. Definitely a pain to prep for. And I guess one thing that I wanted to touch on before we move on to the other stuff that I failed to mention earlier, the Gmax Garbodor. The Gmax pick down in, I want to say we had this as a Tier 4 pick, so you got 60 extra points. And you got to use that to more so stack up with the Tier 2s. So we want to take me through the process a little bit of choosing this particular Gmax, getting those extra points, and then what you were doing with those extra points as a result.
Yeah. So I going in, I didn't really have like a set Pokemon I wanted. I looked at the Gmax and I had a bunch, and then after 2 rounds, everyone but you and myself had drafted Gmaxes, so it's like, well, I can wait on this. And when it got down to it, I towards the end of the draft stumbled upon Lycanroc Dusk after already picking up 2 tier 2s, and I was like, man, that seems really good. I want it.
That's already a pretty fair thought process. We see it worked out in your first match too, 3 kills.
Yes, yeah. I'm excited to see what Lycanroc does this season. So to do that, I had to draft a plus 60 Gmax, and I took a look at them. Some of them, you know, are like the Pikachu and the Eevee aren't great, but the Garbodor, I thought it was decent. It's definitely usable, and I mean, it performed well in my first week.
Sure.
You know, base stats aren't great, but it does have, you know, weak armor if you want to try and set it up to sweep after it gets hit. It does get access to max fighting to increase its attack stat. So it's definitely usable. You know, it's definitely deserves to not be tier 1 or 2, but it definitely has some use.
Sure. It has enough of a move pool too. Yeah, it gets some things you might not think of. So.
Right.
Okay. Considering that and the Lycanroc got 5 of the 6 kills in your first match, that seems like a pretty good strategy that's already paying off. So moving on to the hazard control. Of course, we have the Cinderace with Court Change. I think this is even much more so about the removal, as we see Court Change on Cinderace, Rapid Spin on Eldegoss, Defog on Flygon, Defog on Rotom, Defog on Scyther, and Defog on Skuntank. That should help a lot with the rock weaknesses that you had alluded to before too, as rocks could be prevalent and start to chip away pretty badly at the team, but maybe not as much of a concern with all that. And the only hazard setters you have, though, being the Lycanroc with Stealth Rock, which can work in kind of a mixed sense there, Stealth Rock as well as some nice damage, and the Garbodor being able to set up spikes and Toxic Spikes. Toxic Spikes, something that not many teams have access to. So we are very, very reliant on those if you want the chip damage, but you have so much removal that it may even just dissuade people from bringing hazards at all, which is a pretty cool aspect of the team, I think.
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, last season too, I leaned more towards removal than setting them. I didn't have any way to set them last season, so
right.
Just kind of the way I've been playing.
And you may not even want to be messing with it as much, anyways, with heavy duty boots being in the meta now in this generation. So maybe not something to lean on too much and not have to mess with at all. So for clerics, Eldegoss does get aromatherapy, but the star is, of course, Sylveon. The evolutions, of course, all getting that Heal Bell and Wish combination. I had a Sylveon in a previous league, and I can tell you I really enjoyed the versatility that Sylveon brought offensively and with Wish and Heal Bell support. So nice pickup for cleric option. Priority, got some very nice options again here. Aegislash is Shadow Sneak, very strong priority. Cinderace more so known for Libero Sucker Punch, but still a strong move there on your fastest Mon, might add, so perhaps you're not even that great of an idea to outspeed it. Flygon, First Impression, is a very cool option. Lycanroc's signature move, Excel Rock, of course, being a priority move, Rock, so very cool exclusive move there. You have a couple other interesting options. Scyther potentially with like something like Quick Attack, Sylveon with Pixelate Quick Attack, Skuntank with Sucker Punch is another big one as well, getting stab on that, unlike the Cinderace. So, well, to go along with the very good speed, lots of priority to back that up, which is pretty nice to see. So that's kind of a look at the team overall. Do you have anything else that you'd like to add about it?
No, nothing else about the team. I was quite happy with it and looking forward to see how I do this season.
Yeah, I think it'll be very interesting to see a very different strategy. As you'd said, a lot of people picked their Gmaxes early, and we had picked ours pretty late. So we'll see how much you may need to rely on the Gmax or not with the new rule set. So thanks a lot for doing the interview, and we'll wrap that up right here. Next up, we've got Chad, coach of the Seattle Steamrollers. How are you doing, Chad?
Good, how are you?
Not bad at all. So Chad has consistently done well in these Draft League seasons. Excited to see what he's got this time around. We've got a Corviknight, Blissey, Ditto, Crocodile, Gastrodon, Torkoal, Scrafty, Shiftry, Tauros, Charizard, and the centerpiece there, the Gmax Venusaur, which Chad selected with the 8th overall pick. Obviously, very nice team with Sun. Gmax Venusaur is generally the centerpiece of that, so why don't you talk a little bit about why you thought it was worthy of a first-round pick?
Yeah, so I kind of wanted to do a Sun team in general. It seemed like there were 2 viable Sunsetters, Torkoal and Ninetales. So I figured I could get one of them, assuming I spent my second pick on it. And I think Venusaur is a really solid Gmax overall. It has a great Gmax move. Poison's really good because the Poison Gmax, or the Max Poison, gives you plus special attack. Obviously a great speed tier in the Sun, a fairly usable speed tier even outside the Sun. I also felt like a lot of the Sun abusers were like pretty low tiered, so I just kind of wanted to do a Sun team and see how that worked out.
Sure, and I think another thing too, like GMX Venusaur can't hold an item, but you can still boost up the power anyways. Even without a Life Orb, growth is a really nice complement to help with your GMX even without the ability to hold an item. And to help complement that, your other big pick, the tier 1, is the Corviknight. So talk a little bit about that one too.
Yeah, so I think Corviknight's a really solid Pokemon, and one of the things I really liked about the Sun team is a lot of the offensive Sunmons are relatively low tier, which meant I could kind of go defensive for my higher picks. Like I think Corviknight Blissey is a really solid core, with Corviknight Blissey on special. So I'm very happy overall with the Corviknight Blissey core.
Definitely rough to break through for just about anyone, and the common thing to break through this course, like some things like Blaziken or Infernape, not available with the limited decks, so looking pretty good there. Let's go over the typings then. Not typings. Let's go over stats real quick. Relatively slow team, not accounting for the chlorophyll, but Steve can go into more detail on that.
Yeah. The Steel Steamrollers are coming out with the highest average HP, thanks to a certain Pink Blob.
Ditto doesn't have that much HP, but... it is worth noting that for the stats besides HP, I don't count Ditto because those stats really don't matter because it's going to change to whatever its opponent has. Sure.
The HP is factored in. And outside of that, as mentioned, a little bit on the lower average speed side, actually below average attack and special attack, which I thought was very interesting, considering Chad's favor of hyper offense in the past. Fairly average defense and slightly above average special defense. So definitely looking like more of a defensive team. Yeah.
Right, it just seems like it's a bit of a reliance on setup moves. There's particularly growth, of course, on things like Shiftry or Venusaur to kind of set up there to be able to start breaking a little bit. Of course, you have some plenty of boosted power for things like Charizard. Obviously, the ability to put Life Orb, Choice Band, Choice Specs on things, but yeah, there's kind of an interesting mix there. Again, the speed tiers, nothing over that 110 from Tauros, unless you factor in Chlorophyll. Which definitely becomes a big deal. Even possibility for some low speeds in case Trick Room wants to come, so pretty well covered in that regard too. As far as
I'm also thinking of Ditto for being kind of speed control-y. But I will agree overall, my team is relatively slow. I also think it's pretty reliant on Sun for a lot of its offensive power. Again, I think that may not be the best with a draft league where you can prep really well, but I just figured I'd try something different. So
we all got to figure out how Sun and Rain evolve in the new generations. So let's see how this take goes on it. This take on it goes. So going on to the typings, you have a lot of non-traditional stuff here. The Firewater Grass, obviously, you've got Gastrodon being a solid water type. A couple grass types, the Venusaur G-Max, of course, is the big one. And then fire types between the Torkoal and the Charizard, which I know you value Charizard as a low-tier pick, especially in the Sun with solar power. But then with the traditional Fantasy Core, the Steel Dragon Fairy, only got the Corviknight. No Dragon types or Fairy types currently on the squad. Anything else stand out to you, Steve, as far as typings go?
Yeah, for typing, this team has a little bit of a bug weakness, fairy weakness, flying weakness. It's the worst in the league against normal. Not that that really means anything, but worth pointing out. And rock, as always, is bad. Ice, as always, is bad. But they're not too bad compared to other teams in the league.
Sure, I think there are a couple key resistances there too, with all these normal types, dark types stacking up a bit with each other too.
Actually, one thing that I think is interesting about my team is, despite being a Sun team, it's pretty weak to fire moves. Like really, the only thing I would consider a fire resist would be Torkoal on the physical side. I mean, obviously Blissey is a special wall for everything, but like a Sun, somebody could very easily reverse Sun abuse me and just hit really hard with fire moves.
Very true, yeah. A Gastrodon probably counts as one too, but we're going to move on then into the kind of the extra sections here, looking at hazard control first. Blissey is a pretty cool stealth rock option, as are Crocodile and Torkoal. all relatively reliable there. And plenty of removal too, which is something you definitely need with having multiple fire types. Even with heavy duty boots, still nice to have defog on things like Charizard, Shiftry, of course the ever reliable Corviknight, and even Rapid Spit on Torkoal, should you be deciding to set up some rocks and want to keep them over on their side. And speaking of, I started off that section with Blissey. Blissey is, of course, the cleric of choice with Aromatherapy or Heal Bell, as well as Wish. Wish definitely being what Blissey is best known for, being able to pass those fat wishes on to other allies. As for priority, you have a little bit of relevance. I think the biggest one is probably that Sucker Punch on Shiftry. Getting Stab on that is a cool option. Otherwise, it's got Fake Out. Scrafty's got Fake Out. Charizard Quick Attack, probably not going to be seen nearly as much. But if you have Chlorophyll active, that basically counts as priority in and of itself. So that's a quick rundown of the CL Steamrollers. Is there anything else that you'd like to talk about your team before we wrap it up?
Not really. Like I said, I think it'll be interesting. I think I have kind of a rough early season. I'm playing a lot of people who have historically done very well in the league. So I may rethink my team, but I also may just kind of ride out my early matches and see how it can go from there. Because I do think I have a really fun team. It's just obviously it's on the it's a bit of a one-trick pony, right? Like a lot of my offensive power is from Sun, and that goes.
But even then, if you try to prepare for Sun, and you try to prepare for the defensive core, and then you also have to try and prepare for Ditto, I think that can get to be very difficult to look at. So fun is definitely the name of the game. This will be really cool to see. Whenever it works, I think it's going to work super well and be really cool to see. So thanks a lot for the interview, and we'll move on to the next one. Next up, we've got Hitmonchan, coach of the Close Combat Club. How are you doing today?
I'm doing well.
Awesome. So, John, I think he did very well in the previous VGC season. Finished, I believe, a semi-finalist there. I've had some amazing games with him. He's been kind of my rival, honestly, because he's taken several games off me in the past. So he's going to try again here for another chance at the crown, and with it, he's got a squad of Keldeo at Tier 1, followed by Amoonguss, Slowbro, Escavalier, Klefki, Umbreon, Golurk, Jolteon, Sigilif, Torracat, and the G-Max Charizard. So John had the number 9 pick overall and selected the Keldeo with that. Very strong mon, actually pretty versatile. Why don't you go into that a little bit?
Yeah, so when I first picked Keldeo, so Keldeo was my first pick because I noticed last season that it was really the Tier 1 picks that really defined everybody's team. And one of the Tier 1 mons that I really struggled against, so like last season I had a very defensive team, and I really struggled against Kyurem. I was trying to figure out how I was going to get around Kyurem, and my thought process was that if I add more offense to my team while keeping a very solid defensive backbone, it'll allow me to punch back a lot harder. And that's really what Keldeo is all about. And what's nice about Keldeo is that it doesn't just act as a wall breaker, right? It can actually be a really, really good pivot, too. And that's why I picked it.
Yeah, they've definitely got a nice little tool there with Flip Turn in the new gen. So Keldeo, obviously nice tool against that, a nice offensive tool. I see all the defense in here, and then the G-Max Charizard is another super offensive piece. Sometimes drafted with the Sun, but you opted not to do that, so I want to talk about Charizard a little bit too.
Yeah, so after I drafted Keldeo, thinking about how a lot of very offensive picks got chosen early last season, I was trying to figure out what was I going to pin Keldeo with from a G-Max perspective, because I saw that a lot of people had drafted their G-Maxes pretty early. And that's why I chose to go with Zard. I thought Zard that was a really solid, especially attacking option. I thought people would go more towards a physical, defensive options if they did go for physical defense. So I thought having the combination of Keldeo and Zard, while it gave me a big electric weakness, was really solid.
For sure, and Charizard's G-Max form still provides quite a bit of value with its G-Max attack, burning the opponent's field, and forces in fire types, which Keldeo obviously handles. So a lot of good synergy there already. So let's go into the stats a little bit first, if you would, Steve.
Yeah, so the Close Combat Club are hidden in here, as John mentioned, with that special attack, the highest average special attack in the league. Pair that with also the third highest special defense. So definitely a specially focused team, and probably the most so in the league. Outside of that, having a physical attack on the low side at 84, physical defense right average, speed pretty average, HP pretty average, and speed a little on the low side. But definitely going to be interesting to see how John's specially focused team does against the generally physical focused league.
Definitely true, and it'll be interesting to see how it handles. I saw Chansey and Blissey were both drafted, so maybe play around that a little bit. We have plenty of physical offensive tools to work with as well. The speed may be a little bit in the middle of the pack, but I like the spacing out that I see here. Jolteon at the top at 130 is a very nice speed stat. Keldeo and Charizard being two very important mons, having a high speed also helps a ton as part of the general offensive strategy. And from there too, the spread between the speed tiers is solid too, 97 to 90 to 75. There's a gap there, but it's just enough that I think you have to think about it whenever you're starting to prep. So I definitely like the speed tiers there. And I also see a lot of slow mons too, so if you even have the potential for a Trick Room option, should you so desire, which is pretty nice. So we're going to go over the type combinations a little bit now. I think definitely a big strength of it, as we alluded to earlier, is the Fire, Water, Grass core you've got. You've got two fire types. Torcat is a little bit lesser so, but the Charizard G-Max is a big threat. The grass type in Amoonguss with Regenerator to keep that healthy, and then two very solid water types too with Keldeo and Slowbro. Fire, Water, Grass is not an issue you have in the slightest. As for the traditional fantasy core, there is no dragon type there, but Escavalier is a steel type, and Klefki fulfills two roles in the steel and fairy typings of that. So a lot of cool diversity. I like the Umbreon pick, providing the dark type. I think that complements everything pretty well. But perhaps Steve has a little more insight onto some of the trends there as well.
Yeah, within this team, I am seeing pretty big weaknesses to Fire and Ghost. So those are kind of standing out. We also have pretty decent weaknesses to Electric and Dark, and of course Rock. Rock doesn't stand out as much, even though it's actually the worst weakness, just because of how bad the whole league is against it.
True.
So definitely some common attacking types there that are posing a little bit of a problem, but definitely things that can be worked around.
Sure, and I think a lot of the high tier picks take care of a lot of those weaknesses too. Like you say, fire could be an issue with two water types, or rock is an issue for something like Charizard, but then you have a Keldeo who just slays rock types. So a lot of that could be mitigated for sure with some effective team building. So I'd like to go down to some of the other stuff we got going on. The hazard control. The Charizard has Defog, the Klefki has Defog, and the Sigilus all have Defog. All very effective users, especially that Klefki, if you decide to go with the Defog route on that because of Prankster. And hazards are a little bit light, the Golurk with Stealth Rock and the Klefki with Spikes, but at least having a couple different options for the hazards, and with heavy-duty boots and such, the hazard game isn't necessarily as strong this generation, so I don't see that as too much of an issue. Cleric and Wish Passers, we have two evolutions on the squad, Jolteon and Umbreon, with Heal Bell and Wish. So a couple very effective Cleric options if you're trying to wear down the team to try and get through the big walls that it represents. Very difficult to do, especially in conjunction with some of the Regenerator mons, so it definitely still has that fat side to the team. And then for priority, we've got Charizard with Quick Attack, Jolteon with Quick Attack, Keldeo with Aqua Jet. Torcat Fake Out is probably the first that's actually very relevant, along with perhaps an Umbreon Sucker Punch if you're feeling risky, and Klefki, of course, with Prankster, making everything priority move there. Klefki, a ton of options, as we already alluded to. Spikes, you've got screens, you've got very cool options with Klefki. But that's going to kind of wrap up what we've got there. John, if you have any other thoughts on the team, everything that we've gone over recently?
Yeah, I guess the one thing about this team is that I was a little disappointed with the typing. So I really was hoping to be able to draft another dragon type, especially because it would really complement a lot of my team's weaknesses well. But that just wasn't in the works along with the ground type. So it was a little bittersweet this round. You know, I think I definitely recruited some stuff that's outside of my normal wheelhouse. So that'll be really fun to play with from a more offensive perspective. But I'm a little hesitant to see how it'll actually all work out.
Sure, that's understandable, but I like the squad a lot. I think it can come together well. I'm excited to see some of the things that you come up with in team building. Working in, I think, some of the lower tier bonds in specific matchups will be really cool to see. And of course, the scary Regenerator core and very scary top threats. So thanks for coming on, and we'll move on to the next one.
Of course, it was a pleasure to be here.
And we're going to wrap things up here with the interview with Michael, coach of the Kanto Kinglers. How are you doing?
I'm doing excellent. How are you?
I'm doing awesome. So we're going to go over his team here real quick. He's got the Pelipper, Terrakion, Zeraora, Skarmory, Espeon, Seismitoad, Xatu, Claydol, Liepard, Manectric, and with the 10th overall pick, last in the draft, which gave him a wheel pick, he selected his mascot, the G-Max Kingler. What made you decide on the Kingler in the first round?
Honestly, named myself Kanto Kinglers, and I'll be perfectly flat out honest, I almost didn't plan at all for this. I kind of glanced over like the list of Pokemon, and I was like, oh, I got some Pokemon I like in here. And then the day came, and I saw Kingler G-Max. I'm like, hey, my name is that. I'll choose that. That was the total amount of thought that went into getting Kingler first.
It was pretty fantastic. It seems like it's been working for you so far. I'm very excited to see Kingler. I'm a big fan of Kingler. Of course, last season I had Kingler as one of my Dynamax candidates. Had great success with it, so I can't really fault you for picking Kingler first. That is also something that gave you a few extra points being a lower tier G-Max, which lets you pick 3 tier 1 Pokemon in Pelipper, Terrakion, and Zeraora. Why don't you try and go into a little more detail about those 3 in particular that you chose out of tier 1?
Well, my first pick being like my first tier 1 pick was Pelipper, being that I'm always been a fan of weather teams in general, and Pelipper to boost my, Kingler G-Max's moves in a possible good situation. What with Pelipper's ability to either U-turn or die, making Kingler kind of be able to come in pretty safely.
Honestly, true.
Yeah, and then that was the reason I had Pelipper for sure. And then Zeraora and Terrakion were kind of subsets of that pick. I'm like, okay, so I need some form of like a electric resist because, Pelipper would die instantly. Mm-hmm. And simultaneously, if I'm getting a tier 1 pick, I'd like for it to be quick. Zeraora was the instant, thought process for that one with Volt Absorb and the massive speed stat, mm-hmm. kind of making it very safe for me to do whatever I wanted. And Terrakion with kind of like an offensive coverage. I have a lot of either special attackers or, I've got coverage in like Grass Knot, electric moves, a few fire moves. I don't have anyone that can, sit down with earth and rock moves and properly, wade past a big old team of, people who are weak to that.
Sure. In fact, we've got over it extensively, Steve and I, in the other interviews. Rock is such a good offensive coverage this season. Having mm-hmm. one of the premier Rock attackers will definitely serve you well. And as do those high speed stats. I see a lot of speed overall here, but Steve, if you would be able to break down the stats a little bit more for us.
Yeah, as you hit on, this is the highest average speed in the league, beating out second place by 7 points on average.
Wow.
So definitely the fastest team.
Heck yeah.
A little bit on the frail side in special bulk and HP, having the lowest in both of those. Pretty average attack defense and slightly above average special attack. Still in general physically leaning, but having a little more of that special offense, not so much of the bulk. Definitely looking like more of an offensive team with that speed and lack of bulk.
Sure, and that makes a lot of sense. Even seeing the Seismitoad at 74 speed, that is the swift swimmer of choice with the Pelipper, so that can boost that speed up even more. A couple of fantastic options to help counter some of those slower strategies as well. For traditional cores, you don't actually see all that much in the way of tradition. With the fantasy core, the Steel, Dragon, and Fairy, I see a Skarmory for Steel type. And that's about it. Similarly, water is tripled upon there with Pelipper, Seismitoad, and Kingler, obviously making sense with the rain. And then that's about it too for the Firewater Grass core. Obviously, have a lot of cool coverage with the multiple fast electric types, something that I like to prioritize in my drafts. The Terrakion, similar to something like Mamoswine, where it's really just there for the offensive typing. So it's a little varied than what you might traditionally see in terms of typing. But are there any other trends that stand out to you, Steve?
Yeah, as you're mentioning with these, without the presence of the traditional cores, there are some weaknesses that stand out. Michael has one of the worst dark weaknesses, electric weaknesses due to the water, has the worst grass weakness by far due to water, ghost weakness. As we mentioned, has the best matchup against rock. Even though he's still weak to it on average, it's the best in the league.
Heck yeah.
But yeah, that's what kind of stands out defensively from these.
Sure, that's pretty interesting. Yeah, some of the types doubling up on each other just flat out stops some coverage coming in. So just get one good switch in here or there, and I think you will see a lot of success even with some of the worst matchups there.
I'm definitely hoping.
I definitely think so. And even just finding one resistance, you can start to outspeed things. That's a big deal too. As far as hazard control goes, the two things that definitely stand out first are the magic bounce users in Xatu and Espeon. The other clearing, you have Defog from Xatu once this do get up, Defog from Skarmory, Defog from Pelipper, and a Rapid Spin from Claydol. In addition to being able to set up your own hazards with Claydol's Stealth Rock, Seismitoad's Stealth Rock, one of the most reliable, speaking of reliability, Skarmory with Stealth Rocks and Spikes, as well as Terrakion getting up Stealth Rocks. Very extensive list compared to what we've seen from many other teams. Hazards, of course, help facilitate that offensive role that you can have there, too. As far as cleric options, you have the Evolution. Espeon can grab that Heal Bell for a very fast Heal Bell, too, if you decide to go that route. And wishing, once again, the Magic Bouncers, Espeon and Xatu, able to wish up and perhaps heal up that little bit of residual you've got on your teammates. Priority, there is a little bit. Liepard definitely stands out in that regard with access to Prankster, which makes all of the non-attack moves priority, as well as Sucker Punch. Although Liepard itself is not that strong, getting Stab on the Sucker Punch is a pretty big deal. You got plenty of other options here, although none of them are particularly noteworthy. Zero Aura, I suppose, getting Fake Out and Quick Attack is pretty interesting, despite its speed. Quick Attack from Terrakion, that thing is so strong that will still get, I think, a little bit of consideration here and there. But that's kind of a quick overall breakdown of the team. Is there anything else that went into your thought process, or anything else that you'd like to point out about your team, or anything else before we wrap up?
The basic thought process behind my team was essentially once I had that Kingler and Pelipper picked, I was like, okay, now I just need to cover weaknesses and include, a couple strengths here and there. So absolutely Seismitoad was my Swift Swimmer of choice. Didn't actually intend this, but in the last battle it was super useful while I was looking over the teams. It turns out Swift Swim Seismitoad is actually faster than Unburden Slurpuff, so I was able to make sure that my speed stat was higher, so in case, the Slurpuff did manage to do some significant damage or start getting its belly drum off properly, I would have something that could theoretically, defeat it. And overall, I'm very happy with how good my team seems to have been, and my current biggest fears are Grass Knot and Trick.
I think that definitely makes a lot of sense. And just having that first wheel pick, getting two in a row and being able to say, I'm going to pick around this, that's exactly what you want to be doing with that last pick in the draft. So obviously, job well done so far on building the team around that. So that'll wrap up the interviews with us. We hope to have some other content up on the Wooper Club League channel, things like power rankings, potentially some highlight matches here or there. But thanks for the interview, Michael, and we'll see you all on the next video.
Have a good one.